So we have a very special episode of Let's Get To for you today. So special, in fact, I think I need a different hat. Ah, that's much better.
His eyes are cold and restless. His wounds have almost healed.
Welcome to Let's Get To, your tour of America through the lens of minor league baseball. Baseball from sea to shining sea. And now, the first pitch. Opening thoughts from James Christopher.
And welcome to Let's Get To. I'm your host, James Christopher. We have a fun episode for you today that's just a little bit different. We're not going to be talking a lot of baseball today, because instead, we got the chance to cover a sport that is also rooted in community and a reflection of its past, and that is the sport of rodeo. Now, I've been going to rodeos for longer than I can remember. I grew up in Houston, Texas. Rodeo is a big part of our regular culture. I used to have the belt with my name burned in the back. Been wearing boots since I could walk. And I was a regular attendee of the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo. Now, first of all, not Rodeo Houston. Quit trying to Fast and Furious everything, okay? Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo. I never participated because we'll get into that later. But I was a huge country music fan, and I get that my connections are a little lame, so just take a walk with me. Big country music fan, and I would go to the rodeo in Houston, one of the biggest in the world, to see George Strait and Clint Black and Clay Walker whenever I could. And when you go to those concerts, you end up at the rodeo, you end up at the livestock show, and at least for me, I grew a real appreciation for what that lifestyle is, how hard those guys and women work, and really just what a special part of American culture that it really is. Rodeo and Texas go hand in hand. The cowboy mythology, it's very part of our DNA. If you roll up to the Texas Capitol tomorrow, you're going to see lawmakers and lawyers wearing really nice suits and a really nice pair of cowboy boots. I had a friend of mine used to work for the Texas government, and when he moved on to something else, he got a pair of cowboy boots with the state seal of Texas in the front. It's part of our DNA. Go to a Texas Longhorns game this fall, and maybe you should because we might actually be good. Hook 'em. But go to a Longhorn game, and you're going to see guys wearing cowboy boots and cowboy hats, and women in cowboy boots, jean skirts, and sometimes cowboy hats. It's a part of what we do. I run one of the biggest film festivals, one of the most well-regarded film festivals in the world. And for the entire 12-year run of our history, our award has been a rodeo-style belt buckle, which you can imagine people from like the north, like Chicago and New York, they flip out over the award. They think it's about the coolest thing, because it is. First of all, baseball and rodeo, they really aren't that different in how they're organized. You have cities with large rodeos, and then you have small counties with rodeos. Just like in the city of Houston, you can go to the livestock show and rodeo, and then in a couple of weeks, hit up the Astros game. Major size rodeo, Major League Baseball. But you can also go to small towns, small communities all over Texas and the West and see any level of baseball that we cover on this show. But also, there's probably at least a small county rodeo going on. It makes it one of the sports, just like baseball, that's really accessible to just about every American. You can find it near you somehow, some way. And I think it's, again, one of the things that makes it really, really special. One of the things I like about it as also a history nut is it really does reflect Western expansion. And look, I understand that hearing the word Western expansion, for a lot of people, they think genocide of the Native Americans. And I think it's completely valid, accurate, and true. There's also another side of the story, like there is in every single piece of human existence. There's always a positive and a negative. And you look at, again, any major moment in human history, and you can find that. And with Western expansion and what grows out of the rodeo, obviously you can't have that conversation without talking about the Native American experience. But I think it's also unfair to ignore the fact that there were a lot of people carving a life out of a relatively difficult to inhabit landscape. And the one thing I do realize when talking about this is there's the chance that I'm going to have the same reaction that I had from when I talked about Roe versus Wade a couple weeks ago. I'll probably lose some viewers. I don't know if I have a large PETA or vegetarian fan base, but maybe I do. Maybe I should look into my demographics better, but I definitely understand that is a thing that could happen. But, you know, people have to make their own individual choices. I can't really make those decisions for people. And that's not to say that there aren't controversies around the sport that don't need to be addressed and shouldn't be considered when talking about it. There was a history of animal cruelty in the rodeo that the PRCA, I think, did a great job of addressing, and you really haven't seen those issues come up in a PRCA rodeo in decades. And I think that problem is also twofold, because I think there's also a perception problem of judgments made by people who don't know anything about the sport, who've never been to one, who I think just sort of look down on anything that is connected to more rural, I can't ever say rural America. I think that there is a section of American culture who see themselves as elites, and anybody that's doing anything like rodeo or living on a farm or living on a ranch and living in less inhabited areas, they're ignorant and they're rednecks and they're rubes. This is entirely unfair. I think we should get to a point where we quit judging people based on our perceptions, especially if we don't want to take the time to learn and listen. So I think rodeo has done a good job of dealing with the actual problem as well as the perception of the problem, which can be almost as damaging to the sport. The sport does have an issue with diversity, especially when you think about the fact that Bill Pickett, an African American, is largely considered to be one of the first iconic cowboys. But, you know, and at ARF, at Austin Revolution Film Festival, we call it ARF for short, we've shown a lot of documentaries and narrative films dealing with the Black experience, both in rodeo and as cattle ranchers. And there are Black rodeos, and you're starting to see an increase in the number of Black cowboys competing at mainstream rodeo events. One of the things that might shock some of you is the fact that there are gay cowboys. There are gay cowgirls. There are, and there always have been. And so for decades, you've had the Gay Pro Rodeo Association that has helped raise awareness for the fact that rodeo, like America, is made up of all kinds of different people. And I really applaud people that care enough about the sport to make sure that those changes and those issues are handled and dealt with. When we talk about rodeo, we cannot ignore, nor should we ignore, the flip side of the coin that was Native American Indian genocide. And you'll even see that being dealt with in rodeos. First of all, there are a lot of Indian rodeos out there. You can see examples of that in Yellowstone, a show that will come up again, I promise. There are entire rodeos based on the Indian experience, and then you're also starting to see Indian rodeo events pop up in larger, more mainstream, air quotes for those of you listening, rodeos. Again, dealing with the part of the rodeo that you have to talk about if we're going to be honest about the sport. And so again, I think it's just unfair to make a snap judgment or a broad-based judgment based on something that a lot of people don't even want to take the 5 seconds to learn about. And so hopefully if you're still listening, you've never been to a rodeo, that'll be kind of what you're doing here. One of the things I love about it is it really, the work of the cowboy and the cowgirl reflect what it's like on a ranch. And that work hasn't really changed when we think about the old Westerns and what it looked like then. Again, look at the show Yellowstone. You can learn a lot from that. The most important thing you learn from Yellowstone is not to let Rip take you to catch a train, but that's a whole other conversation. You still see large impacts of cowboy and cowgirl culture, rodeo culture in popular culture today. You know, every year you should be watching Lethal Weapon at Christmas because, like Die Hard, it is a Christmas movie. And there you'll see Martin Riggs running around LA in a pair of cowboy boots. Yes, his jeans are too short and they look ridiculous. But it's at least still part of that iconography that we're used to. Tom Cruise wears cowboy boots in both Maverick movies. Except when they put him in sneakers when they're doing a dangerous stunt, like nobody's going to notice. Come on, guys. I definitely grew to appreciate the entire sport, even though, again, I never participated. And I think it's weird because part of my job in the Army was to ride around in a helicopter and sometimes jump out of said helicopter. The first things first is you're going to see a living history, an important connection to our past as Americans that helped grow a country that was all exclusive to east of the Mississippi to being the country we recognize today. 48 continuous states from the tip of Maine to the tip of Southern California. You're going to see the livestock that helped shape the country. A lot of people haven't been around a horse. You're going to see horses. You're going to see calves. You're going to see steer. You're going to see bulls. You're even going to see sheep if you get to some mutton busting, and you should because it's cute and hilarious. And you're going to see how these animals are so different than the normal pets you're used to being around, like a dog or a cat or a snake. If you're keeping a snake as a pet, I think you should rethink your life choices. The third thing that you're going to see are the athletes, the men and women who carry this sport and this tradition forward. These are athletes that take a beating, they get up, they dust themselves off, and they do it again. There's no injured list like there is in baseball, okay? A lot of people think NFL players are tougher. If you're a running back and you tweak a knee, you get to take the next week off. If you're a rodeo rider and you tweak a knee, you tape it up and you get after it. And look, here's I think is a good example. You put any bull rider behind an offensive line, they're going to get 3 or 4 yards of carry. I wouldn't want to see Zeke Elliott on top of a bull. Actually, I would. That actually would be hilarious. So again, I think you're going to see some of these really tough people competing because they love it. And the fact is that they have to keep showing that grit and that toughness that I think embodies what we see when we see a cowboy or a cowgirl. It's embodied in them because they can't take a day off, that they have to keep riding, they have to keep winning, so that way they can keep a roof on their head, clothes on their back, and food on the table. So we'll be back next week talking baseball, but I do hope you stick with the episode. Even if you've never been to a rodeo before, and maybe especially if you haven't, maybe you'll get some respect for the sport, respect for the athletes, and maybe, just maybe, the next time a rodeo pops up next to you, you'll get out and enjoy what I think is one of the most unique sporting experiences.
From the bleachers, the Let's Get To Game of the Week.
And welcome back to From the Bleachers, but we're coming to you from just outside the arena at the Cody Stampede in Cody, Wyoming. This is the rodeo capital of the world, and so we thought we'd do things a little differently this episode and to give you a glimpse into another sport rooted in tradition and in community.
Wyoming comes complete with a sky that seemingly goes on forever. And under that sky, the state sport of Wyoming, the uniquely American competition that dates back to the 1800s, goes on every summer night in Cody, Wyoming, the sport of rodeo. The Cody Nite Rodeo is a nightly competition that runs in the rodeo capital of the world from June 1st to August 31st, giving locals and travelers alike a chance to see some of the best rodeo athletes on the circuit every night. In addition, the world-famous Cody Stampede runs all of July 4th weekend. Lots of rodeo in the summer. The Professional Rodeo Cowboys Association named the Cody Stampede the best large outdoor rodeo of the year in both 1998 and 99, and in 2001, the Cody Nite Rodeo was nominated for Best Small Outdoor Rodeo of the Year. So Cody really is the rodeo capital of the world. Now, when I arrived, I was greeted by a celebrity because that's what Cody does. Mongo the Bull, of course named for the famous brute in the Mel Brooks classic, Blazing Saddles. They wanted me to climb aboard, but I wasn't having it because unlike Mongo, I'm not just a pawn in the game of life. I was also afraid I couldn't get down.
Mongo only pawn in game of life.
Now, this is my first outdoor rodeo, which seems weird to ponder until I remember I grew up in Houston. And I couldn't have picked a more beautiful spot on a more beautiful night, with the sun setting over the mountains in the backdrop of the arena, the rays of light creating a halo as it faded from view. The arena feels carved out of the Wild West, just as the cowboys, cowgirls, and other pioneers carved a way of life in this rugged terrain. But before the show started, I had to spend some time with the true stars of the rodeo, the horses. I've always been mesmerized by horses. There's the physical power that you can only experience when you ride one, and then the mythical symbol of freedom that they embody. Anytime I'm around a horse, I'm awestruck.
There are many traditions of the rodeo that I truly love.
And I love how the anthem is presented. Those of you who've been listening to the show for any length of time know that that's a really big deal for me. Now, at typical rodeo, a flag bearer rides into the arena, the flag whipping around the dirt floor as they make a complete circle of the performance space. Now, some rodeos, they'll ride into the middle and stop for the anthem. Sometimes they'll keep riding around slowly the entire time the anthem is played. Either way, it's moving, it's beautiful, and it feels uniquely American. Every rodeo has a variety of competitions, and some of them are pretty consistent from rodeo to rodeo. Some rodeos will do one thing, some rodeos will do another, and I thought I'd highlight a couple of my favorites that we were able to get some really good footage of at the Cody Nite Rodeo. So first up is the saddle bronc riding. Now here the cowboy's job is to stay on his mount for at least 8 seconds. Seems easy, until you watch the fact that these horses are able to jump and buck so high that all 4 legs are suspended in midair. More often than not, you'll hit the dirt. And just like in baseball, when you see a successful ride, it's really sweet. One event that you don't see at all rodeos, but this one was pretty fun, was the calf scramble. The calf scramble, much like mutton busting that you see in so many rodeos, is designed to get the kids involved. Kids who catch a calf in some rodeos will win a prize, and in others they win the actual calf to raise for 4-H or FFA. But no matter what the end result, the process of how we get there is hilarious. Calves are a lot harder to catch than you might think. Speaking of kids, I really dug, and this might be the first time I'd actually seen it, junior barrel racing. They move slower than their adult counterparts, but it's fun to see competitors start out, only to see them get better down the road as they compete at a much higher level. I love that you can see the beginnings of the formation of a relationship between the riders and the horses. Honestly, it's just adorable. Speaking of barrels, and this might come as a shock to some people, but barrel racing is by far my favorite event in the rodeo. I love the speed, the agility of the horses, and the way the cowgirls and their horses communicate to become an incredible team, navigating how fast they have to go and their ability to turn on a dime. The horse is just as much an athlete as the rider, and the way they are won is just incredible to watch. Now, probably the most popular event and the one most seeded in pop culture is the bull riding, and this, generally speaking, closes out the rodeo. The goal again is to stay on for 8 seconds on a big beast that goes about 2,000 pounds that doesn't just want to throw you off, but sometimes really wants to hurt you. It's the job of the bullfighters to keep the bulls off the riders after they've been thrown. They do it with flair, they're fun, they do it with gusto, even though they know they're putting themselves at risk for someone else. Think of it like a sacrifice in baseball, but with much higher stakes. And they do it with more bravery than I could muster. I've done some crazy stuff back in the Army, stuff that when I look back 20-something years later, I ask myself, why? But there's no way you could tie me to a bull. Not one. One rider went head over horns and into the path of the rampaging beef. Another got hung up on the bull after he got thrown, his arm tied to the animal. He was bucked and thrown and twisted, lucky enough to stay out from under his feet. And you thought you had a bad day at the office. But it's not hard to see why this event is one of legend. When you compete, you're always on the brink of danger, and those that do it have to be just a little bit nuts, in my opinion. Better them than me, I'm content to sit here to watch and watch anytime I can because I'm into it. Every single rodeo competitor shares at least one characteristic: bravery. They ride from event to event, and if they get thrown, if they get hurt, they have to dust themselves off and do it again. There's no contracts in this contact sport, just the will to keep riding. The night was completely black at the Cody Nite Rodeo, and it was a blast. I am honored to have been able to go. It was something I definitely want to do again. It was so much fun. It was fun to shoot, just based on how unpredictable it all is, and it was nice to get what felt like a little piece of home being a Texan. It's truly a special time spent in a very special place, and I truly want to come back for the 4th of July weekend and the Cody Stampede.
St. Louis team, we have who's on first, what's on second, I don't know's on third.
That's what I want to find out. I want you to tell me the names of the fellas on the St. Louis team.
I'm telling you, who's on first, what's on second, I don't know's on third.
Do you know the fellas' names?
Yes.
Well, then who's playing first?
Yes.
I mean, the fellas'
Who's on
base.
first? The Let's
The fella
Get
playing
To
first
Team
base
of the
for St.
Week.
Louis. Who? The guy on first base.
Presented by the Baseball Bucket
What are you
List
asking me for?
Podcast.
I'm not asking you, I'm telling you, who is on first?
I'm asking you who's on first.
And we are super excited to welcome to the show. She is a barrel racer. She is a breakaway roper, Hadley Tate, coming on Let's Get To. How's it going, Hadley?
I'm good. How are you?
Fantastic. Thanks so much for joining us. It's crazy because this is a baseball show, so I'm in completely uncharted territory.
Well, this will be a first for me too, so I guess we'll just wing it and see how it goes.
We'll be in this together. Tell me a little bit about just you and how, I read some articles about you. I know you've grown up in Oklahoma. When did you start to realize that you wanted to compete in the rodeo?
Okay, so I am 21 years old. I have been competing since I was 4 years old. My dad was actually a professional cowboy, and so he kind of was just like the godfather into doing it. But my mom was a city girl. So growing up, we always had the option of doing it or not doing it. Like it wasn't like just because my dad rodeoed, we had to do it. But when I was 4, I had my first pony, Lulu was her name. And my parents started doing the Cody Nite Rodeo in Cody, which is the longest night going rodeo in the world. It's like 95 plus nights, June 1st to September 4th this year. So it's, every single night. My parents started doing that. Yeah. And so they just moved our whole family up here. And so that's really when I started doing it was then, and I was 4 years old, and they still do it to this day. So 18 years later. And growing up, like I said, it was just kind of like my dad did it, so we did it. But the older we got, the more it was like, okay, this is a really expensive sport. This is a lot of work. This is a lot of care for animals. Like it's not just you have to work on. You are taking care of another animal to do this. And so the older we got, the more it was like, okay, I want to do this. Like I want to pursue this. And I actually saw a career coming around the age of 10. I really, really was just hooked. And I knew that it was just something that I was ready to dedicate a lot of my time to.
So tell me a little bit about so you do 2 major competitions, the breakaway roping and the barrel racing. One of the things that we kind of talked about on the show, or we will talk about later, because that's how shows work, where we'll edit it together, but I already did this. Yeah. But the relationship with your horse, what's your horse's name, and talk a little bit about just how you guys are a team, right? Like it's very much that.
Yeah, no, honestly, I have to give all the credit to my horse, because at the end of the day, it's him doing all the work. I'm just up there guiding him. My horses now are Cisco, who is honestly the best horse I've ever owned in my life. I got this horse kind of in a weird deal. Like I went to try him and he was not good at all. And I had literally paid all of my own money for him. And this lady, her name's Cheryl Davis, she was like, Hadley, this horse and you would really get along. She's like, I can just see it. And I was like, Cheryl, this horse is like a 40 horse. Like, how am I going to go win on that? She was like, just trust me, please try him. So I tried him, bought him with all of my own money, and take him to a barrel race 2 weeks later. And we win the whole thing, win the whole 1D. And I was like, oh my gosh. She's like, I told you guys would get together. And so that horse has given me everything that he has. Like I will walk out in the pasture and he'll just walk up and just like put his head on my shoulder. And like, if I'm having a bad day, he just knows it. Like, that horse is honestly the best thing I've ever had. Like, you could not offer me an amount of money that I would sell him to you now, because just of the connection that I have with him. And that's a big thing, I think, in competition. Like, I know with sports, it's like, if you're on a good team, that can make or break you. Like, if your team base is not good, then there's a good possibility that you're not going to perform right. And it's kind of the same with us. Like, if we have a good connection with our animal and we like respect them and they know that we respect them and we do everything to keep them feeling good, then they perform a little bit better for us. So that's definitely my relationship with Cisco. I have a new breakaway horse. His name's Biggie Smalls. Because he's like,
the 90s kid in me loves that. So yeah,
I know, right? Well, because Cisco's 16 one hand, so he's huge, and Biggie's like 13 hands. Like, he's tiny. And so I was like, oh, Biggie Smalls. Like, and so Biggie, he's awesome. He kind of came from a little bit of a rougher path. And so we've had a lot more challenges since I've gotten him, getting him to kind of trust me, getting him to work the way that I need him to work, because he had just a lot of a rougher handle put on him. And so it's kind of just going back to like, hey, this is a safe place. We're doing this for fun. Like, less is more with him. So I've kind of learned I'm learning, I should say, how to handle him to get that more connection like I have with Cisco. But it's a learning process. And I mean, these animals give us literally everything they have. And so it's kind of crazy, because it's like this huge animal, and I'm a pretty small girl. I'm like 5'1", 110 pounds. And so it's like, I have these huge animals and I'm like, they respect me. Like, that's crazy. But it kind of is just a really cool feeling once you do get that good connection with your animal.
You know, it's interesting because you talked about how it's different with Biggie Smalls than Cisco. And I was sort of reminded when I was an NCO in the Army, like, every soldier is led differently and they will tell you how they need you to lead them. It's kind of the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's really cool. And it's like, I have one horse that if you were nice to him, he would hate you. Like, you had to be like really rough with him. And like, you had to like let him know, I'm the boss and I'm this, and he would work great. And then Cisco, he's really sensitive. Like, you just kind of like are like, okay, let's do this. And he does it. So it's pretty funny. They're like kids, honestly. Each kid's
almost
different.
like kids. So I read somewhere, correct me if I'm wrong, that when you first rode in Cody yourself, that you changed your hometown when they announced you to Cody. Is that accurate?
That is true. Yes, that is accurate.
Talk to me about the connection with that rodeo and that town, because I absolutely loved it when I was up there.
So my reasoning behind changing it was, I'm from Apache. I was born and raised in Apache, but my first memories of rodeo and everything were in Cody. And to be quite honest, I had more of a family base in Cody than I even do in Oklahoma with personal family. Like, I am just, the rodeo family is literally a true thing. Like, I mean, I know you probably understand that in the Army and everything, but like, you get a group of people that you feel like are family, and they make things feel like home. And so when I think of rodeo and I think of my career and I think of everything that I have to base that on, I think of Cody. Like, this place has made me the person I am today. It got me my scholarship in college. Like, it did everything. So I thought, when I'm going to rodeo and the circuits I want to do, I want it to be in Cody. So I did that, and it was a really good decision. I am really happy with it. Like, I rodeo up here all summer long, and then coming next week, I'll be headed back to Oklahoma, and I go to college down there. So it's nothing really personal. It's just the stories and the memories with rodeo and Cody. That's just, it's my home. Like, I can honestly say, I don't know which one I would consider more of a home when I have to answer that question, because the family and the just people that support me out of Cody is a lot stronger, I should say, than probably in Oklahoma.
Well, you brought up going to school, and a lot of people don't know that you can get a rodeo scholarship to college. Just talk a little bit about that competition and how is it different? How is it the same compared to doing it on the circuit?
Okay. So like for rodeo and college, there actually are teams like, Oklahoma State University, they have a rodeo team. And a lot of people wouldn't know that because like they're just a big football and like baseball and every basketball, huge basketball school, but like they actually have a rodeo team. Like that's really good. And so all these smaller colleges have them too. Like I go to a school, Southwestern Oklahoma State University. It's in Weatherford, Oklahoma. And like our rodeo team is actually a big part of our school. Like it is, we won reserve women's title this year. One of our girls on our team won nationals in barrel racing at the college finals. So how all of that works is we have 10 rodeos a season. We have 4 in the fall and then 6 in the spring. And we travel to different colleges. So we go to Colby, Kansas, like we're all in a region. So we have Kansas and Oklahoma are our region. And so we go to Colby, Kansas, Durant, Oklahoma, Stillwater, Oklahoma, Weatherford, Alva, Oklahoma. We go to all these different places and we have to drive ourselves. Like, I mean, it's out of our pocket. So if we don't win, it really sucks.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
We get points for that. And so you have a long go and then they take the top 10 in each event and then they have a short go and you get points for that. And then at the end of this year, they take the top 3 in each event out of the whole region for points. And then they take women's team and men's team. So I ended up being 5th 2 years ago and I was, I think, 8th this year. So I've been really close to it. It's just been super difficult because like we go from huge arenas to 12-second arenas. So it's like really hard because my horse doesn't really do great at that. So I'm looking for a new horse right now. But you, like, I'm on a full ride scholarship. Like you get everything. So it's really awesome because you're going as a team, but you're competing individually, but you still want your team to do good. So it's like a really cool aspect. And you learn and meet so many amazing people. Like we have all of our great friends that, I mean, if I'm driving through somewhere in Kansas, I know I have friends from regions there that will let me stay and stuff. And then once you do like the top 3, like I was saying, then you all go compete in Casper, Wyoming, and that's for the national championship. So that's like regions from like Oregon, New York, every region comes and competes in Casper. And then they crown the national champions. So it's really cool.
I love that. I just Googled that my alma mater, the University of Texas, has a club team, but I guess they don't compete at a.
Yeah. And like a lot of schools, like, because I was looking to go to OU for a while, I could independently rodeo underneath OU. So like they don't have like scholarships and stuff that they would give you, but they can approve you putting the OU logo on and you going independently to those rodeos and stuff. But that would mean you're your coach. You have to enter yourself. So it's just a lot of work.
Oh, yeah, I can imagine. Before I ask the sort of 2 meta questions, NIL is a new thing, right? Everybody's talking about this name, image, likeness stuff. Have you all started to navigate that as rodeo competitors? Are we even there?
Not. No, we have not.
That's probably good. It probably would be a bit of a headache. I was thinking about this, and anytime we have like, again, we're mostly a baseball show, so we'll get female play-by-play announcers, we'll get female coaches. And I want the same question to you. Are you aware that there's going to be some little girl that's watching you in the stands and going to see you ride and go, I can do that because she's doing that? Are you aware of it? And is there a responsibility there?
That's actually a great question. So growing up in Cody and everything, we've had families that have came along throughout the years. And there was this one family that this little girl, like I guess, took a picture years ago. And like she saw me going and she was like, I want to be her. And then like a couple years later, they came back and then she was like, her hair, like just look at her hair. And she was like, Mom, I can still like look at her. And she was like saying all that. And then she was like, just look at her out there. And years later, as she was a teenager, they came back and found me and we got a picture together. And they were telling me just how through all these years, she's followed that and she's watched that. And the best thing that I can say that has helped me with like that is seeing those kids. And that keeps me reminding myself, like, it doesn't matter technically what happens in the arena. There's always someone watching you, and it's how you compose yourself, handle yourself, and just to always be that light and just always be that person, no matter how good you're doing or how bad you're doing. If you see a little kid there, tell them like, hey, how are you doing? Like, and because you never know what that's going to lead to that kid's life. And there was a little boy last night in the breakaway roping. He's from Thailand and he's never caught in this arena ever. And he barely ropes, and he roped and he caught his first calf ever. And he was like 7 seconds. And then I roped and I was 3 flat, but I broke the barrier. So it was 10 seconds added. So he won. And his dad came up to me and he was like, thank you for letting him win. I was like, well, I really didn't need to, but and I like went and I found the kid because it's that generation and it's those kids and it's those memories that like sometimes a good job from someone that might be a little bit more advanced to you goes so much further than even just the feeling that you have, and I've always tried to find like, I was kind of always like, I didn't win a ton when I was little. I'll say that. My parents didn't provide me with the best horses. They made me work for it. And I am so grateful for that because I think that has made me definitely the rider I am today. And it's also made me the person and the horsemanship. And so if I always see someone struggling, I always try to go find that person because the good people are always going to get told good job. But it's the people that aren't and that are going through a dry spell or that are going through a slump that it is going to mean more. So I think looking back and looking at like kids in the stand, I always want to be that person. Like when they can look back and be like, well, she was at least really nice to me, or you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And I think that that's a really big responsibility to anybody in sports is someone's always watching you, no matter what event, no matter what sport. And you always kind of need to be careful on understanding that responsibility, I guess is a good way to put it.
And it does, again, seem like baseball where you can have a stretch where you're not playing very well. And if you don't stay focused, that stretch will keep going versus.
Oh, it's the mental game in rodeo it's 95% mental, 5% physical. Like, and that's a true thing because I mean, you do it constantly and you get beat down and you have sore horses or your arm starts getting sore. And it's just, how do you mentally come over that? You have to tell yourself, okay, we're not going to go miss this calf now. Like we've missed 10 in a row, but we're not going to miss that one. And so it can be really tough, but if you can overcome that part of it, then you're pretty set.
All right. I'll ask one question, but it's really a two-parter. One, what's next? And is it fun traveling with your dog?
What's next is for this summer is college. I'm now going back into my college region and everything. Next for me is I'm kind of starting to work on my career and everything. So the hardest thing right now is figuring out career, rodeo balance and internships and all of that. So that's kind of a scary jump. So the next jump is kind of scary, to be completely honest.
Yeah.
But for the next year, we have college rodeos and circuit rodeos throughout the year. So that's pretty exciting. And traveling with my dog is the best thing ever. She is awesome. I have a German Shepherd Husky. Her name's Laska. And I also have a cat that goes with us. So I have a dog and a cat on the road that are my little best friends. So
that's amazing. What's your major going to be? Or what is your
major is communications broadcasting. So broadcaster, or I would like to I have a couple opportunities in the works for some internships with football teams. I love football, big football fan. And then I also have a couple opportunities with the Cowboy Channel. So I have either road I would like to go down. So
I think that you're going to be pretty excellent at whatever you do. She is Hadley Tate. Thank you so much for jumping on to Let's Get To.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Ladies and gentlemen, please adjust your scorecards. We have a special guest in the lineup.
So as we continue to dive into the world of rodeo, we're excited to welcome Keith Smith. Keith is the general manager both of the Belton Chamber 4th of July celebration and PRCA rodeo and the Central Texas State Fair. Keith, how is it going?
Well, it's going good. It's a little warm outside, but other than that, can't complain.
It's a little warm.
Summertime in Texas.
Yeah, right. Exactly. It's so funny. I'm hearing everybody around the country complain about how hot it is. And I'm like, well, this is it's kind of normal. Just another day. First of all, you guys had your event not even a month ago, the big rodeo, at least. How are you feeling? Have you recovered from what I think has to be a really hard week of work?
Yep. It's more than just a week. That's another thing, the misconception on that. To me, I've been working on next year's event about 6 months ago and working on 2 years down the road, which will be the 100th celebration for that event. For a while. So, I mean, it's not a week deal, a month deal. To me, it's 365 times 2. So that's kind of how I approach it.
Well, one of the things too that we've been talking about on the show, because we do have a lot of listeners and viewers from like the Northeast where this isn't a thing. Right. Rodeo is sort of probably even mocked by some.
talk a little bit about why events like the rodeo and like the state fair are so essential to both the communities in Texas and other places that have them, but why they really are important and they should be kept going.
Well, here's probably the most thing that I usually say, and I truly believe in it, is number one, that might be the only place that you see your neighbor once a year and get to visit with them. You know, you see their families and you're really good friends, but you're so busy. This is the only time you may see them. I accommodate a lot to that. And then the other thing is it's where you meet somebody new. Maybe it's somebody from the Northeast that's down visiting. It's their first rodeo. The person sitting next to them may be their 50th rodeo. You know, they're the ones asking questions of the other, you know, why is this? Why is that? And, you know, that's how you become friends. You exchange phone numbers, emails, you become social media buddies. I mean, you see a lot of that going on.
It's funny because no matter what the industry is, you have to actually get to meet the people in your industry to keep it going. And I also think it's funny that, or maybe not funny, but it's ironic that there are a lot of people that maybe look down on events like that because they don't know and they don't realize that really that whole population of people is vital to everything that we have on our plate, everything that, you know what I mean? It's like, it's actually performing an important service in our country.
Well, it is, you know, it is an agriculture type event that involves people going back to the way the old West are roping and riding. And that's originally how rodeo started. Was they had this gathering and it was a competition amongst the ranches, and they did the competition. They declared the winner. And then after that, they had a big chuck wagon cook-off or cookout, however you want to do it. And then that's how that's how neighbors are. I mean, that's just what they did. And that's kind of how it started. Our deal is a little different. We don't have a lot of contestants per se that other rodeos have this time of year because we're down in Texas. Most of the rodeos are up north.
Right.
So I've used this term before, showdeo.
Okay.
We have a show along with the rodeo. Our openings are second to none. My sound guy does the NFR and a lot of other big events. My video guy has done the PBR finals, the NFR finals. And then my announcer, Charlie Throckmorton, he's been coming here for 30 years and he's part of our community. And I feel like that's very important. People look forward to seeing or hearing Charlie's voice. That's like, oh, I hear Charlie's voice. It's time to buy rodeo tickets again. Because he also cuts our commercials.
Well, it's funny you say that because obviously, you know, you're on a baseball show. I know you're a big baseball fan, but just like the voice of minor league, the radio voice you grew up with.
Yep.
And I remember going to the Houston rodeo and that voice is familiar and it's comforting.
Yep. And Bob Tallman and Boyd Plahamus have been doing that rodeo for a long time. And, you know, that's what you associate events with when you hear that. Texas Rangers baseball, you know, Eric Nadell and Mark. I mean, when I was growing up, that's who I listened to on the radio was those two guys. And that's what baseball is. TV, Vin Scully was the guy for me on baseball. Yeah. I mean, I look forward to Saturday afternoons watching the game, but more importantly, listening to him and what he had to say.
Yeah. And then talk about one of the best to ever do it. We've actually been to y'all's rodeo 4 or 5 years ago, and it was a blast. We had an amazing time. How fired up does the community get knowing it's in town? Because you guys do 4th of July, right? With the parade, with the rodeo, all that stuff. How fired up does the community get as y'all get closer? And can you really feel that whenever you guys are setting stuff up?
Well, that's the thing. As the event comes closer to the date, and sometimes the parade will follow the rodeo, or sometimes the parade's before the rodeo starts. If the parade is before the rodeo starts, you can really feel it. I mean, people are pumped when you go downtown to the parade. You know, everybody's asking, hey, how's the rodeo going? You know, where can we get tickets? If the parade's afterwards, you can hear the people at the Coliseum talking about, okay, hey, we got to go over here and set up our chairs tomorrow morning because the parade's going to be, and, we've sat here for the last 20 years. It's that type of deal. So, I mean, it's the anticipation of everything coming together, of the rodeo, the parade, the festival in the park, the carnival. I mean, this a family type event, and families sharing the event with other families.
So one of the things that I've noticed when I started following minor league baseball is they all talk to each other. They all borrow best practices. They all, almost like talking about like the people coming in and meeting once a year. It's sort of like that in that industry. Do you guys find a certain kinship with people that are this involved in rodeo or state fair? And do you find yourselves just sort of, I know Jessica's part of some organizations like IAFE and all these others.
Yep.
You find yourself sort of reaching out to other people and forming a community that way with people who know what you're doing as opposed to someone who maybe doesn't.
Yep. And with that, I'll go to probably between 30 and 50 performances a year at other events to see what they're doing, how they're doing it, talking to those people. We have 2 trade shows a year in the industry, and that's IAF&E and then TAF&E. I've done classes at both of them, but once the classes are over and people come and ask, hey, how did you do this? Or, why did you do this? Well, I fire back and go, well, why are you doing what you're doing? Because I want to know what you're doing. That's the great thing about our sport is everybody's is in it together. If my rodeo's good, then, I want somebody else's rodeo be just as good or even better. To me, that's because that just makes everybody better per se. Pick up your game and this makes it good for our industry.
One of the things that growing up in Houston, the rodeo was just a part of our, like you said, even though it's for a couple of weeks or for you guys for about 4 or 5 days, it's something you're thinking about all year round. Every Houston kid has Go Texan Day, the day the rodeo starts. I mean, it's a big deal.
Yep.
When I started to meet people who didn't have it, there was always this sort of these negative impressions that I think based largely on ignorance. The animals were mistreated. Can you dispel any of those? I've tried at the beginning of the episode just to really drive home how it's not really what people think it is.
Well, and that's the thing. These animals, world-class horses, world-class bulls, the timed event animals, they probably eat better than you and I do. Some of those horses go for 50 and 60,000. If you're going to spend that type of money, you're dang sure going to make sure you take care of it. Same way with the bulls. I mean, they're worth a lot of money nowadays. People have come a long way in how they take care of their stock. It's because that's how they make their living for the most part. Once they get in our building, they're in the air conditioning. Where we actually house them, we actually have ceiling fans in part of the pens to move the air and make sure they are comfort. Without them, there's no rodeo. So you've got to take care of them. I'm not going to say that 50, 60 years ago, things may have been different, but gosh dog, they're sure a whole lot different today because these guys have got a lot of money invested in them, a lot of time. And it's how they make their living. So they've got to take care of them. The old saying that you put the rope around the bull and it hurts him or this. These guys, that's what they're born to do, is born to buck.
Yeah.
Most of them, you can go up and scratch on their bellies and they'll never do anything to you. They're a pet at the end of the day. And there's a lot of them that will sure enough get you. But no, things have changed dramatically on that aspect of it. I mean, you don't see the ropes and the prods and all that stuff. They're well taken care of. They're housed in great environments. Their pens are clean. They eat 2 times a day, sometimes 3 times a day. So,
yeah, and what I would say to people, there's not an antagonistic relationship, particularly with the bucking horses or the bulls. And if you go to the PRCA Hall of Fame, they've got wings for animals that have been inducted into the Hall of Fame as well, I think, to your point.
Yep, that's exactly right. some of the great horses, one of them, Jerry Nelson, he just got one in the Hall of Fame this past weekend, Medicine Woman. That horse was born on his ranch. I guarantee you that horse was taken better care of than a lot of other things in the United States of America. So just because he takes pride in taking care of his animals, but he knew what he had. He'd bought a bunch of horses from Harry Vold back when he started his horse program, and he spent a lot of money on it. And he told me, he says, Keith, this is what I enjoy doing, and I'm going to take care of them just like they're my grandkids. And that's what he does.
How much interaction, particularly at y'all's rodeo, do you see between the cowboys and cowgirls and fans? And I compare it to like minor league baseball, where there's so much accessibility. How much do you see the sort of the sport and the culture being passed down that way by kids watching these cowboys and cowgirls and then getting to interact with them afterward?
Well, it's funny you asked that. PRCA and PBR, Professional Bull Riders, Professional Rodeo Cowboys Association. At the end of the day, they're both the same type of person, cowboy, whatnot. PRCA, those guys, they make a great ride. They'll jump up and bump their chest and go down the fence line slapping hands. That is the best thing for the rodeo, moving it to the next deal. Some little kid getting his hand slapped by a contestant. That's awesome. A lot of times you'll see the contestants after the performance go on the rail and start signing autographs, just like they do in baseball. PBR a couple of years ago, they didn't mandate it, but they highly encouraged the riders to go do that. And, I'm kind of at the point where if we got some riders and their name or household names, I'll give them a gas card or $50 and say, hey, go sign autographs for 30 minutes. Because that's worth it, if you ask me. Because that fan experience is worth that extra gas card or $50, whatever it may be. They'll come back next year just because, hey, I got such and such autograph. This guy's riding tonight. I want to try to get his autograph. So it's the same type deal. In baseball, the fans try to get the autograph during batting practice or right after batting practice. You've got hundreds of people trying to get that. For the most part, they're kids, they're adults or whatnot. There's a few autograph hounds in there.
Yeah.
And I think baseball's done a good job of trying to weed those out. And I really appreciate that. In the rodeo world, nobody's trying to get an autograph to sell it on the internet tomorrow night. I mean, it's this pure, I like this guy, I want his autograph.
Yeah,
so that's pretty cool.
Truly love of the game. Before we talk a little baseball, because I know you're chomping at the bit, and you and I are going to find a Round Rock Express game to hit up. What are some of your favorite events at the rodeo? Like I shocked people, I think, in this episode. I really like the barrel racing because I think that agility that you see. What are some of your favorites?
Well, what's really popular right now is the ladies breakaway roping. Okay. They just started doing that a couple of years ago in the PRCA. We've done it the last 2 years. That is the most exciting sport right now because you got a lady on horse going 100 miles an hour, throwing a rope, trying to catch a calf. They don't actually tie it down. When the rope hits the end of the saddle, that's when the flag stops. And that's really exciting. I like the rough stock events. I like the saddle broncs and I like the bulls. I've done PBRs for 20, 25 years. So that's the reason why I probably like the bulls just a tad better. But that's my favorite. The guys that make I'm going to call them a pretty ride because to me, that's what they are. And, there's nothing better than that. And usually I'll sit next to the announcer and I'll start nudging him. He's going to make it. He's going to make it. And, of course, everybody gets excited because we got a good ride and a high mark score.
And these guys and girls, they have to be so tough because there's not a contract. They've got to be able to ride at the next competition. I think that's it's part of what attracts it to me, right? Is that, that they're doing it because they love it. We've all seen ball players that are at the end of a $50 million a year contracts start to phone it in. I love that aspect of it where they really got to keep working.
Well, to me, the two toughest athletes are the hockey players and the rodeo cowboys and cowgirls. Number one, the hockey players, they don't got the huge contracts. I know some of them do, but most of them don't.
Sure.
They don't get any tougher than those guys, in my opinion. I mean, to go out there and take a puck to the head or the knee or whatnot. And then the rodeo cowboy or cowgirl, there's nobody paying their expenses. It's all on their own. If they don't win, they don't eat. They don't get this, that, or the other. There's some superstars that have done really well, but that's the thing. They've done really well. They invested a lot in it. They're athletes. And that's probably where the sport's changed the most in the last 10 to 12 years is these guys, these rodeo cowboys have started taking better care of their bodies, going to the gym, getting a personal trainer, treating it more like a business.
Sure.
And that's where you get the Casey Fields, the Trevor Brazils, those type guys that have really done well over the last couple of years.
It reminds me of when Tiger Woods started and all these golfers realized that you got to stay in shape if you're going to keep up with Tiger Woods, because he was really one of the first athletic golfers that I remember competing in sport.
Well, you're exactly right. I can remember, I think it was 97, in the spring of 97, watching Tiger at whatever big golf tournament he was playing and telling my wife that, my gosh, this guy, he's for real. He's serious about this. Back then he was 20 something years old. And I mean, he was cut. He knew what it take. He took care of his body. And that's pretty important nowadays.
All right. Well, let's talk a little baseball. So you're a big Rangers fan. You grow up a Rangers fan. Is that
Yep.
who your first baseball love was?
Yep. My first love was the Rangers. They moved to Arlington in 72 and we lived in the Metroplex in Southlake. So that's how I came to love with them. My second one was the Astros, and that's because my grandparents lived in Houston. So we kept up with both of those. I thought I was going to be an MLB player and, make $1 million. And I remember my dad telling me, hey, you ever get a contract, I'll buy you a new pickup. Well, of course, that never happened, but I had a dream anyhow.
Yeah. They're rebuilding now. I mean, how invested are you still? And what are your thoughts on sort of the rebuild that's going on?
Well, there's two train of thoughts on this deal. When you build a new stadium, you can cruise first couple of years with
Good point.
A mediocre team and still make plenty of cash flow to keep your operation going and, doing the right things. If you'll think back when they moved from the original stadium to the ballpark in Arlington, that first 94, we had a pretty good team. And then it kind of slacked off. And then 96, 97, 98, they were really good. And all the pieces came together. And you had some guys, some ownership that was willing to spend the money. Farm system at that time was just getting going.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they cruised along. 2011 went to the World Series and all that good stuff. And then those players started getting their lifetime contracts. Baseball, you get one lifetime contract per your years of service per se. That's the old rule.
Yeah.
And that kind of split the team up. They moved into the new ballpark, and it didn't seem like the focus was as much as winning baseball games as it was selling tickets. I think the ticket market's way out of price on that stuff.
Yeah.
For the average family. And I think that's hurt some. I know opening day.
To back that up, I saw numbers that we were talking about on our show that the average price for a family of 4 to go to a major league game is $250 a game.
Yeah. I mean, that's not cheap in today's world. In my perspective, we were looking at opening day tickets. A ticket in the outfield was like $90
mm-hmm.
upper deck. I was like, I'll go the next round and see the same thing. But one of the other things I thought interesting on that is Houston and Texas did not play a weekend series at all this year. They're all during the week. So
that's a good point.
If you wanted to go see your two favorite teams in Texas, you'd had to go during the week. That's the other thing I disagree with is how they do their ticket pricing. I'll use the Rangers, for example. That's what I'm most familiar with. The Bostons and the New Yorks, the popular teams, during those series, they move the price up or it's more expensive to go to those games. Well, naturally, those are the most exciting games because it's Boston and New York or the Astros, whoever it may be.
Sure.
That they've got a little rivalry with. It makes a difference. I think the game's changed a lot in the past 5 or 6 years because of the contracts and whatnot. It's everybody's got their own opinion, but that's my 2 cents on that. I'd like to see ticket prices where a family could go see him, or if you and I wanted to go up to a major league game and not spend $300 getting there and getting back home.
Yeah. Yeah, I did a tour of the Rockies, and they actually keep bleachers open where they sell $5 tickets, and they promise to never go higher than that. So that way families, they can bring food. That way they at least get into the ballpark. You're not far from Round Rock. I mean, do you check in express games? Do you do the minor league game at all?
Yeah, we do. We really enjoy those. I still have some great friends that work down there. So we go down there from time to time. I like the minor league aspect of it. It's more like, a family atmosphere. Prices are affordable, and I think they keep it that way for a reason. Once again, if they've got a good team, their attendance is up. If
Sure.
their team's not so good, then, their attendance is down. I think the Ryans have done it right there in Round Rock. So there's a lot to be said for that. A guy named Jay Miller, Dave Fendrick, they were down there part of that opening deal. I think they set the model, and that's how good it's been, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think I'm really glad that they refused to sell to the Astros, which is why they're back to the Rangers, and Sugarland has moved to the Astros AAA when all that.
Right. Have you been to the Sugarland Stadium?
I have, yeah. Constellation Field. It's interesting. I don't know that it feels like a AAA ballpark to me, but it's fun and it's a nice ballpark. Have you been out?
No, we haven't been down there. I've kind of followed them. They got a couple of players that I think are probably going to be in the bigs at some point in time and make a good impact. We talk about the major league teams and minor league teams. If you look at the ones that are good, those are the ones that are getting to the next level, going to the series and whatnot. I think a strong farm team is a way to go now. The days of buying free agents and making it that work. The money's so crazy. I mean, I don't know how that works. And it's funny when you talk about that. I was watching a documentary Sunday that had Bob Gibson and Kurt Flood. And Kurt was the guy that actually probably opened up free agencies back in the early 70s.
Yeah. You're talking about After Jackie, right? I saw it too. Yeah, it's so good. And Bob Gibson had to have been the most intimidating pitcher ever. I mean, that was a scary looking dude when he's on the mound.
Well, and when I was little, Bob Gibson, he was one of my heroes. That dude could throw the ball.
Yeah.
So.
He absolutely could. Well, you and I need to get out to a Round Rock game. Keith, thanks so much for jumping on Let's Get To, talking a little rodeo and a little baseball.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me, and look forward to the next time.
And now on to close it out, the right-hander from Houston, Texas, James Christopher.
So that does wrap up this special edition of Let's Get To. We'll be back next week with more baseball, but I hope If you live in an area that's got a local rodeo, look it up online, find out when you can go, because it is a lot of fun and it is a great reflection of an important piece of American history and Americana. But until then, make sure you're getting out to your rodeo or you're getting out to your ballpark. You get the same thing there. You can get some peanuts, you can get some Cracker Jack, but most important, let's get to.
Let's Get To is presented by Twitchy Dolphin Media. Creative Director, Jessica Bybee-Jedgetts. Executive Producers, James Christopher, Andy Tom Chesson, and Scott McIntyre. Produced by Andrew Nelson and Eric Mertens. Associate Producers, Timothy Jedgetts and Jess Canaster. Music by Andy Bertelson, Grace Usselman, and On Holiday. All content created by Let's Get To is the sole property of Twitchy Dolphin Media. All content created by teams covered in the episode are the sole property of the trademark holders. Let's Get To is a proud member of the Curved Brim Media Network.
This podcast is part of the Curved Brim Media Network. Here are some of the other members of Curved Brim Media.
Hi, I'm James Christopher, host of Let's Get To, and we are going to be taking you on a tour of this great country through the lens of minor league baseball. That's right, from sea to shining sea, we're going to be looking at towns big and small as we explore the greatest game ever invented.
This is Patrick
and Corey
of BaseballMapper.com, and we have made an interactive map to help highlight all baseball teams from the majors down to collegiate summer leagues.
We want to bring you closer to baseball, so get on the site and find a team near you today.
Hi, this is Ed Rivera of the Data Chronicles. Join me as I interview people just like you and players, coaches, GMs on the path that led you to become a fan of the sport.
What's up, Bucketheads? I'm Anna DiTomaso, and each week on the Baseball Bucket List podcast, I speak with a different fan about their favorite baseball memories, what the game means to them, and what's left to check off on their baseball bucket list.
Hey guys, this is Patrick Larson from the Minor League Baseball Hat History Series, and in every episode I go through the history of minor league teams through my personal collection of hats. You can find me on Twitter at PatLarson1. I hope you guys enjoy.
And I'm Paul Caputo. I tell the story of America one minor league baseball logo and nickname at a time on the Baseball by Design podcast.
Learn more about Curved Brim Media at curvedbrimmedia.com.